Have you ever wondered what it feels like to walk into a world where every step feels like a test? Clara Reynolds, a determined yet anxious secretary, arrives late on a rainy morning in Boston, her files scattered and her nerves frayed. She thinks she's prepared for a routine day, but fate has other plans. Standing before her is Vincent Sterling, the cold and intimidating CEO whose reputation for precision and control is legendary. Will Clara survive the scrutiny of skeptical colleagues and a man who expects perfection, or will her courage, honesty, and wit be enough to make him see her value? In a whirlwind of unexpected challenges from complex contracts to high-pressure client calls, Clara discovers not only her own strength, but also the subtle humanity of a man everyone else fears. As sparks of connection turn into trust and admiration, and as professional success intertwines with unexpected affection, the line between work and personal feelings begins to blur. What happens when a woman's talent, honesty, and persistence challenge the walls of a billionaire's heart? Can love find its way through ambition, doubt, and workplace intrigue? Join us as we follow Clara's journey from nervous secretary to indispensable partner, and Vincent's path from control to vulnerability. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to experience this emotional, inspiring story together. The rain had soaked Clara Reynolds' blouse through and through, clinging uncomfortably to her shoulders as she fumbled with the stack of papers in her hands. Each step on the slick Boston sidewalk made her heart beat faster, not just from the cold, but from the anxiety that had been building all morning. She was late 10 minutes late, and in her mind, that fact alone could determine whether she would make a good first impression or a complete disaster. Her hair stuck to her forehead, her heels slid slightly on the wet pavement, and a stray corner of her resume had somehow stuck to her shoe. Clara pushed open the glass doors of the office building, trying to appear composed despite the chaos surrounding her. A startled receptionist knocked over her coffee, sending a small splash onto the pristine marble floor. Clara froze, cheeks burning. "You're Clara Reynolds, here for the executive assistant interview," the receptionist asked, blinking rapidly as if she couldn't believe the whirlwind that had just appeared before her. Clara nodded, fumbling to straighten the papers, muttering an apology under her breath. She tried to explain, all in one breath, the subway delay, the misread address, the rain, even the rogue piece of paper clinging to her shoe. The receptionist raised an eyebrow, but pressed the call button for the office anyway. "Mr. Sterling, the candidate is here," she said. Clara inhaled sharply, wishing the floor could swallow her whole. She had imagined this moment 100 times, but nothing had prepared her for the reality of stepping into Carter and Sterling Inc. headquarters. The elevator ride was tense, and Clara could feel the weight of the other employees' gazes as whispers flitted behind her. "She'll last a week, maybe 2. Remember Emily. She cried in the bathroom every day. Victoria lasted barely a month." She ran out during lunch. Clara tried to block them out, focusing on her breathing and the smooth clink of her heels on the elevator floor. Finally, she stepped onto the 32nd floor and straightened her posture, as though a few inches of height could somehow instill confidence. Her desk awaited, just outside the towering office of Vincent Sterling, the CEO whose reputation for rigor and unflinching perfection preceded him. Clara took a moment to absorb the room. Every piece of furniture gleamed, each corner meticulously organized, and the air seemed to hum with authority. She adjusted her blouse again, glanced at her soaked hair, and forced a smile she hoped appeared calm. When the door opened, Vincent Sterling stepped out. His presence was commanding, almost stark against the neutral tones of his office. A dark, tailored suit hugged his frame, his hair immaculately styled, and his eyes ice-cold yet intensely focused locked on Clara. Every instinct screamed at her to shrink back, to apologize again, to somehow disappear, but she held her ground, forcing herself to take measured steps forward. "You're late," Vincent said, his tone neither kind nor angry, just a statement that cut through the nervous hum of her thoughts. Clara blinked, feeling the sting of judgment, but quickly recovered. "Don't trip, don't stumble, don't let him see your fear," she thought. She licked her lips, adjusting a stray strand of hair, and met his gaze with honesty. She explained the morning's mishaps briefly, keeping her tone factual yet not apologetic. Vincent's expression softened, almost imperceptibly, but his eyes stayed sharp. There was a flicker there, something Clara hadn't expected. Beyond the initial scrutiny, beyond the corporate discipline, there was a glimmer of curiosity. Her heart skipped a beat. Caught between the fear of failure and the tentative spark of intrigue, the receptionist stepped back, observing silently as Clara's words seemed to land. Vincent folded his arms and studied her like a complex puzzle, measuring, weighing, analyzing. Clara felt exposed but oddly empowered, as though her honesty had carved out a space for her to exist without pretending. She straightened the papers in her hands, and a small, almost imperceptible smile tugged at her lips. A brief silence settled between them, the kind of silence that makes one hyper-aware of every movement, every breath. Vincent finally leaned back slightly, and Clara dared to take a mental note of the way he tilted his head, the faint crease between his brows, the curiosity that lingered there. This was no ordinary interview. It was a test of character, resilience, and composure. And for the first time that morning, Clara felt she might pass. "I'll give you a 1-month trial," Vincent finally said, breaking the stillness. His voice carried authority, but lacked the sharpness that had made her heart race. "If you survive it, you stay, fail, and you leave." Clara's stomach did a nervous flip, but she nodded. "Challenge accepted," she said quietly, a hint of determination underlining the words. She gathered her belongings and stepped back toward the elevator, feeling the weight of her new responsibility settle in her chest. The staff watched her with renewed curiosity, their whispered bets and predictions floating around her like a storm she would have to weather. As the elevator doors closed, Clara exhaled, feeling the tension in her shoulders begin to ease. She had survived the first encounter, navigated the scrutiny, and, most importantly, had made an impression on Vincent Sterling that went beyond the ordinary. There was anticipation in the air, and Clara felt, deep down, that this was only the beginning of a journey that would test every ounce of her resilience, wit, and courage. For a brief moment, she allowed herself to hope that she could not only survive, but thrive. Hope that she could show them all, including Vincent Sterling, what she was truly capable of. And as the elevator descended, Clara knew she had just stepped into a story that would change everything: her career, her life, and perhaps even her heart. The challenge was set, the players in place, and the first move had been made. She would have to prove, day by day, that she belonged. But as she glanced back at the towering office doors of Vincent Sterling, she couldn't help but feel a flicker of excitement mingled with fear. She was nervous. Yes, but for the first time in a long time, that nervousness carried the possibility of something extraordinary. Clara Reynolds arrived at her desk, heart still pounding from the whirlwind of her first encounter with Vincent Sterling. The rain had dried on her blouse, leaving behind a faint chill that seemed to seep into her shoulders. But it was nothing compared to the nervous energy coiling in her chest. The sleek office around her looked intimidating up close. The polished wood of her desk, the humming computers, and the neatly stacked files all spoke of order and efficiency. A world she had only glimpsed from the elevator. Her first task was deceptively simple: learn the system. Yet the office equipment seemed designed to test her patience. The fax machine blinked at her with red lights, buttons she didn't recognize glaring in sequences that looked almost cryptic. She pressed a few keys tentatively, hoping for a signal, any sign that she was doing it right. A slight buzzing noise, followed by a paper jam, made her jump. Clara bit her lip and muttered under her breath, "Okay, stay calm. You can figure this out." Carefully, she extracted the jammed paper, aligning it perfectly, and tried again. Just as she was starting to breathe a little easier, her phone rang. She picked it up promptly, hoping to sound confident. Carter and Sterling, Inc. Clara Reynolds speaking. "How may I assist you?" The voice on the other end was sharp, impatient a client with an issue that required immediate attention. Clara scanned the email thread in front of her. trying to correlate the details with the documents she had just organized. Every instinct told her to falter, to apologize for her inexperience, but she remembered Vincent's eyes from earlier, curious, not condemning, and straightened her tone. The conversation went on, tense but manageable. Clara asked clarifying questions, jotted down notes, and confirmed appointments. By the end, the client seemed satisfied, though Clara felt drained from the adrenaline of maintaining composure. She exhaled quietly, pressing her palms to her face for a moment, then forced a small smile. First call survived, next step, conquer the emails. Her inbox was a battleground. Messages flagged urgent, others marked for follow-up, and a few with subject lines that made her stomach knot instantly. She started prioritizing, color-coding in her mind red for immediate response, yellow for important but not critical, blue for everything else. As she moved from task to task, her hands moved with nervous precision, shuffling papers, taking notes, and occasionally glancing at Vincent's office to make sure she was not overstepping. The staff around her murmured, some casting glances over their monitors. She's new. Watch her fumble. 1 month? I give her 2 weeks. Clara ignored them, focusing instead on finding her rhythm. Every keystroke, every phone transfer, every careful annotation was an act of silent defiance against the doubts surrounding her. She reminded herself that competence wasn't about perfection, it was about honesty, intelligence, and adaptability. Then it happened. As Clara sorted through a thick contract for a key client, her eyes caught a small discrepancy, a clause that contradicted another section, something that could have cost the company thousands, perhaps millions. Her pulse quickened. She traced the lines carefully, making mental notes, then flagged it for Vincent, unsure if she should bring it up immediately. Her fingers hovered over the intercom, trembling slightly, but she knew this was her chance to demonstrate both her diligence and her acuity. Vincent stepped out of his office, catching her in mid-motion. His gaze swept over her expectation mingled with that same curiosity she had noticed on her first day. Clara explained the discrepancy concisely, pointing out the potential impact and suggesting a solution. Vincent's eyebrows arched. For a moment, the office seemed to hold its breath. He leaned closer to examine the documents, nodding slowly, the rigid lines of his mouth softening slightly. Clara felt a strange mixture of relief and pride. She had navigated the equipment, the emails, the demanding client, and the subtle scrutiny of her peers all within the first few hours. And now, she had captured the attention of Vincent Sterling, not with charm or politeness, but with her intellect and keen observation. The twist was subtle but potent in a sea of conformity. Her authenticity shone brightly, catching even the CEO's eye. Yet there was no time to savor the moment. The office buzzed on around her, co-workers whispering and casting skeptical looks. Some of them still doubted her abilities, but others glanced at Vincent, noting his measured reaction to Clara's insight. It was clear that she had unsettled the usual order. Clara straightened her posture and returned to her desk, carefully balancing urgency and composure. She felt the weight of responsibility settle firmly on her shoulders, but welcomed it. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of activity scheduling meetings, responding to emails with precision, and managing a flurry of phone calls from both clients and internal staff. Each successful task built a quiet confidence, but Clara remained aware of the thin line between competence and error, knowing that one misstep could undo the careful impression she was cultivating. By mid-afternoon, she noticed a subtle shift. Vincent had returned to his office but was peering occasionally through the glass partition, observing her with an intensity that suggested respect, curiosity, and perhaps the first flickers of admiration. Clara allowed herself a brief, private smile, but quickly refocused on the tasks at hand. There was no room for complacency. She had to prove herself every step of the way. Whispers among her co-workers continued, a mixture of skepticism and reluctant acknowledgement. Did you see how he looked at her just now? She might actually survive the month. Clara kept her expression neutral, neither encouraged nor disheartened by their commentary. She had learned long ago that others' opinions could be distracting, and that focus and clarity were her allies in a world of judgment. The day ended with Vincent stepping out of his office, finally addressing her. "You'll start tomorrow at 8 sharp," he said, a note of authority tempered with something softer than she had expected. Clara nodded, feeling a swell of anticipation. She had survived the first day, navigated challenges, and left an impression that mattered. As she packed her bag to leave, she glanced around the office. The whispers and curious glances were still there, but so was a sense of possibility, a chance to prove herself, to rise above doubt, and perhaps to surprise even Vincent Sterling. Her pulse remained quick, a reminder that she had stepped into something bigger than herself. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, more scrutiny, and opportunities to demonstrate her value. And Clara Reynolds, for the first time that day, allowed herself to imagine that she might not only endure, but excel. The office doors closed behind her with a gentle click, leaving her with the quiet hum of anticipation and the promise of what was to come. The morning sun filtered softly through the tall windows of Carter and Sterling Inc., casting a gentle glow across the rows of polished desks. Clara Reynolds arrived earlier than usual, determined to face whatever challenges this day might bring. Her bag was neatly organized, pens lined up in perfect order, and her notebook open and ready. Yet, beneath this careful exterior, her heart fluttered with a mixture of anticipation and apprehension. Today, she had been tasked with a seemingly simple matter, a review of a routine contract, but from the murmurs in the office and Vincent's subtle expressions the day before, she suspected it carried far more weight than it appeared. Settling into her chair, Clara took a deep breath, feeling the hum of the office around her, the faint clatter of keyboards, soft murmurs of conversation, and the occasional ring of a phone were familiar now, yet each sound seemed amplified by her own nervous energy. She opened the thick stack of documents before her, scanning line by line with meticulous attention. As she read, she recalled a legal update she had come across over the weekend regarding new compliance regulations in Boston. Something about the clauses in the contract seemed off. A particular phrase conflicted with recent changes in business law, a nuance that, if overlooked, could jeopardize the deal entirely. Clara's fingers hovered over her keyboard as she drafted a careful note, double-checking the language in the contract and cross-referencing with the new legislation. She whispered softly to herself, "Okay, this could make or break it. Don't rush, just focus." Her eyes darted from screen to document, mentally tracing the flow of obligations and penalties. The office around her seemed to fade as her concentration deepened, each keystroke deliberate, each annotation precise. Suddenly, her phone rang a call from the client involved in the contract. Clara straightened, feeling the familiar flutter of nerves. This was the moment to put her research and instincts to the test. She answered promptly, her voice calm yet courteous. "Good morning. This is Clara Reynolds. How may I assist you?" The client's tone was immediately sharp, revealing impatience and frustration. Clara listened carefully, taking notes with deliberate speed, absorbing the nuances of their concerns. As the conversation unfolded, it became clear that a minor misunderstanding regarding a clause had caused the client's irritation. Clara's heart sank briefly, recognizing that even a small oversight could have serious implications. She allowed herself only a second to breathe, then carefully laid out her proposed solution. Her fingers danced over the keyboard as she prepared supporting documents, citing recent legislation and industry standards. Every word was measured, every reference precise. She paused, listening to the client's responses, adapting her explanations as needed, all while keeping her tone confident and approachable. Vincent Sterling, standing nearby, behind the glass partition of his office, watched silently. His expression was unreadable, but Clara could feel the weight of his gaze, as if each gesture and word were being measured. She reminded herself to maintain composure, keeping her nerves in check while also allowing her intellect and intuition to guide her. She could sense the office staff's curiosity, whispers floating through the air like tiny currents. Look at her. Go. She's actually handling it. Clara ignored the murmurs, focusing solely on the task and the potential outcome. The client's tone softened slightly as Clara presented her solution. Acknowledging the thoroughness of her approach, she guided them through the relevant clauses, highlighting how recent changes in law supported her recommendations. The call lasted longer than she expected, each minute a test of stamina and clarity. At one point, a minor error, a misplaced figure in the supporting documents, threatened to derail the progress. Clara's stomach tightened, but she quickly corrected it, clarifying the numbers and explaining the adjustment with calm assurance. Her heart raced, but she did not falter. After what felt like hours compressed into moments, the client finally relented, satisfied with the solution and appreciative of the diligence and insight Clara had demonstrated. She allowed herself a quiet exhale, fingers lingering over the keyboard as a small smile formed. It was a small victory, yet monumental in its implications. She had navigated pressure, complexity, and scrutiny, and emerged with the contract intact. Vincent stepped out of his office, the faintest hint of a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Well done," he said, his tone measured but carrying a weight of genuine acknowledgement. Clara looked up, cheeks flushed with a mixture of relief and pride. She met his gaze, noticing for the first time a spark of surprise, admiration, and perhaps a hint of respect. The dynamic between them shifted subtly. He was no longer merely evaluating her performance. He was beginning to recognize her intellect, her resourcefulness, and her composure under pressure. Around the office, whispers intensified. Colleagues glanced at one another, some skeptical, others quietly impressed. Clara felt the familiar tug of self-consciousness, aware that every action was now being measured, every success scrutinized. Yet she also felt a renewed sense of purpose, a confirmation that her instincts and careful attention could not only meet expectations, but exceed them. The rest of the morning flowed with a rhythm she was beginning to understand. Emails were managed with thoughtful efficiency, phone calls answered with precise articulation, and documents reviewed with meticulous care. Clara's confidence grew with each completed task, though she remained acutely aware of the stakes. She knew that success in small victories could lead to greater expectations, and that the eyes of Vincent Sterling, colleagues, and clients alike would follow her every move. As the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the office floor, Clara paused for a brief moment, glancing at the city skyline beyond the glass. The wind stirred faintly, carrying with it a sense of momentum, change, and possibility. She realized that each challenge she overcame, each small victory she secured, was building not just her professional reputation, but also a quiet authority and presence that could not be ignored. Vincent observed her from his office, noting the careful way she organized documents, the clarity with which she navigated complex issues, and the understated confidence she exuded. For the first time, he felt that Clara was not merely a temporary assistant, but a force that could influence the flow of the company's most critical matters. The realization unsettled him slightly, but in a way that was both intriguing and compelling. By late afternoon, Clara had cleared her desk of pending tasks and arranged her notes meticulously for the following day. The small victory had given her a sense of accomplishment, yet she knew the challenges would only grow. Her colleagues' whispers had shifted subtly from doubt to admiration, mixed with a hint of envy, and she understood that with recognition came new pressures. Clara allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. She had navigated the unexpected twists of the day, proven her acumen, and even earned the acknowledgement of Vincent Sterling. The victory was small in appearance, but immense in significance. It was the first of many steps toward proving her value, establishing her presence, and navigating the complex world of corporate expectations with integrity, intelligence, and grace. The morning light spilled softly across the Boston skyline, filtering through the tall glass windows of Carter and Sterling Inc. Clara Reynolds entered the office with her usual quiet determination, yet today something felt different. There was a subtle tension in the air, a heaviness that went beyond the usual rhythm of ringing phones and clattering keyboards. Vincent Sterling, usually composed and impenetrable, appeared tired, his sharp suit slightly wrinkled, and his hair less meticulously arranged than usual. Clara noticed immediately. A pang of concern tightened in her chest as she adjusted her skirt and approached his office. She paused at the threshold, observing him silently. Vincent's shoulders slumped forward, a rare vulnerability showing through his usual fortress of control. Clara knew instinctively that he didn't need a lecture, a reminder, or even a question. He needed care, simple and unassuming, without judgment or expectation. She quietly gathered a cup of herbal tea from the small kitchenette, adding a slice of lemon and a teaspoon of honey. The scent of chamomile and citrus filled her hands as she walked toward his office. The subtle aroma, a soft invitation to calm. Clara knocked lightly on the door, her voice gentle. "Vincent, I brought you some tea. You look like you could use a break." He glanced up, surprised, but did not protest. Clara stepped inside, setting the cup carefully on his desk. She noticed the fine lines around his eyes, usually hidden beneath an unyielding gaze, and the tension in his jaw. There was a softness to him now, a side of Vincent Sterling she had not seen before. He was capable of such control in meetings, negotiations, and office strategy. But here, alone with a kind gesture, he seemed fragile. Clara offered a tentative smile, allowing silence to fill the space. It was not awkward, but intimate in a way that felt unexpected. She adjusted a stray paper on his desk, noticing the careful arrangement and the signs of fatigue in the subtle disorder. Her fingers lingered for a moment on the edge of the stack, conscious of the trust and the responsibility implicit in simply being present. "Thank you," Vincent finally said, his voice quieter than she had ever heard it. There was no authority in his tone, only acknowledgement and perhaps relief. Clara nodded, accepting the gratitude without words, understanding that sometimes care was enough without conversation. She sat at the edge of a nearby chair, observing him sip the tea, the warmth of the cup between his hands a small anchor in a hectic world. Minutes passed with understated simplicity. Clara took the opportunity to organize a few documents for him, making slight adjustments here and there. Vincent allowed it, occasionally looking up, studying her movements. There was a rhythm developing, a gentle interplay of observation and trust. He made no demands, and she offered no commentary beyond what was necessary yet in this quiet collaboration. Something subtle shifted between them. Clara noticed the faint lines of tension easing from his forehead, the way his posture softened with each sip of tea. He began to speak, haltingly at first, sharing small details about the late night he had endured, preparing for yesterday's client meeting. Clara listened intently, nodding and occasionally asking light questions, encouraging him without intruding. She sensed his reluctance to appear vulnerable, yet also his need to be understood, to be recognized as human rather than an untouchable executive. As the morning stretched on, Clara found herself sharing bits of her own routine, the small rituals she had developed to stay organized, the books she read, the news she followed to anticipate industry changes. Vincent listened, not with the calculating air of a supervisor, but with genuine curiosity. His eyes, so often cold and assessing, now softened with interest and engagement. Clara felt a warmth bloom in her chest, a recognition of the connection forming. The office noises around them seemed to recede. Each passing minute allowed a rare intimacy to emerge. Clara adjusted the blanket over Vincent's chair when he slumped slightly, and he did not object. He allowed her small gestures, a silent acknowledgement that this was a space where he could let go of pretense. There was a delicate balance professionalism maintained, yet humanity allowed to surface. Then came the twist, a sudden admission from Vincent, almost whispered, almost hesitant. "I don't usually show this," he began, his gaze dropping to his hands. I haven't felt comfortable letting anyone see me like this in a long time." Clara's heart skipped. It was not a confession of feelings toward her directly, yet it was an opening, a crack in the armor that rarely allowed anyone close. She reached out, placing a gentle hand near his without overstepping, a silent gesture of understanding. Vincent looked up, surprised at her calm presence. "With you, I don't feel as guarded," he said, voice low and earnest. The admission hung in the air, fragile and sincere. Clara felt an unexpected swell of emotion, a mix of empathy, curiosity, and an unspoken recognition of the uniqueness of this moment. She allowed herself to simply exist in it, offering quiet companionship rather than advice or opinion. Their interaction continued in small, meaningful ways. Clara refilling his teacup without prompting, Vincent allowing himself a sigh of relief at the support, moments of laughter over trivial office mishaps, and brief exchanges of shared observations about the city beyond the glass walls. Each small act, each understated conversation, deepened the sense of trust and subtle attraction. Clara recognized it, the beginnings of something delicate and important, but tempered by awareness of the professional environment. As the day progressed, Clara returned briefly to her own desk, yet her mind lingered on the interaction. She reflected on Vincent's rare vulnerability and the trust implicit in letting someone witness it. A quiet realization formed. She felt a protective care for him, a desire to offer support, even as her mind reminded her of boundaries and office decorum. Vincent, for his part, remained quietly aware of her presence, noticing the attentiveness, the intelligence, and the gentle decisiveness with which she navigated the office environment. He found himself observing her in ways he had not allowed himself to observe anyone in years. The awareness was unsettling, yet invigorating. By late afternoon, the office had settled into its usual rhythm, yet for Clara and Vincent, a new pattern had emerged, one of subtle connection, mutual respect, and shared humanity. Clara felt a cautious excitement, an acknowledgement of the emotional stakes now entwined with her professional responsibilities. She knew the path ahead would be delicate, balancing rising expectations, office dynamics, and the nascent, unspoken bond forming between them. The office buzzed with the low murmur of voices, punctuated by the clatter of keyboards and the occasional ring of a phone. Yet beneath the familiar rhythm, Clara Reynolds sensed a tension thicker than usual, like the air before a storm. Whispers followed her as she passed colleagues' desks. "She's moving up too fast," one said under her breath. "How is she even qualified?" Another muttered. Clara kept her head down, heart tight, reminding herself that she was here to work, not to participate in office gossip. Her desk, once a safe space of organized order and calm, now felt like a stage under scrutiny. Every movement, every adjustment of papers, every click of the mouse was being silently evaluated. Clara could feel eyes on her back, judgment in every glance. She tried to ignore it, focusing on preparing documents for the board meeting, yet each whisper and subtle smirk gnawed at her composure. Vincent Sterling had noticed too. He moved through the office with his usual quiet authority. Yet today his steps seemed slightly heavier, a tension in his jaw betraying concern. He had always prided himself on controlling the office environment, on steering the professional currents with precision. But now, he felt a vulnerability he hadn't experienced before, an awareness that the stability of his team, and perhaps the rhythm of his own life, was intertwined with Clara's presence. By mid-morning, the board convened in the sleek conference room with its polished oak table and floor-to-ceiling windows. Clara's heart pounded as she followed Vincent inside. Chairs scraped lightly against the floor, and the quiet hum of the air conditioning seemed amplified in the silence. The senior executives, William Grant, Margaret Ellison, and Thomas Reed, looked unusually stern, their expressions measured and critical. "Miss Reynolds," William began, his tone clipped, "we've noticed your rapid rise within the company. Can you clarify the nature of your contributions and why you were promoted so quickly?" Clara's chest tightened. Every word from the board felt like a spotlight shining on her every decision, every achievement, every misstep. She straightened in her chair, inhaling slowly, trying to anchor herself in composure. The questioning intensified. Margaret's eyes were sharp, assessing every nuance in Clara's response. "It's important that promotions are based on merit," she said. "How can we be certain your advancement reflects performance rather than proximity to leadership?" The words landed like stones in Clara's chest. She felt the weight of skepticism, of doubt, not just from strangers in the boardroom, but echoing through the office as whispers of envy and speculation. Clara opened her mouth, ready to defend herself, but paused. She could feel the intensity of Vincent's gaze from across the table, supportive yet anxious. The room waited, the silence pressing. Finally, Clara made a decision. She would not let herself be diminished or manipulated. She would speak, but on her own terms. "I believe my work speaks for itself," she said, voice steady despite the tremor of nerves. "The contracts I've reviewed, the clients I've guided, the processes I've improved, they're measurable and effective. I take pride in my contributions." A ripple of murmurs moved through the room. Thomas leaned forward, his fingers drumming lightly on the table. "And yet," he said, "some feel that your rapid ascent is unusual, unprecedented, even—" Clara's hands tightened slightly on the edge of the table. She recognized the underlying challenge. They were testing not only her professional skill, but her resilience and self-respect. After a brief pause, Clara made a decision that startled everyone present. She stood, the subtle authority of her posture drawing the room's attention. "I cannot remain in an environment where my value is constantly questioned and undermined," she said. Her voice was calm but firm, carrying a resonance that silenced even the murmurs. "I resign, effective immediately." A stunned silence filled the room. Vincent froze, the weight of her words settling like a physical presence. He had expected skepticism, yes, but not this Clara's decisive act of self-respect. Her refusal to endure condescension was a shock to him. His chest tightened with sudden fear, a visceral sensation he rarely allowed himself to acknowledge the possibility of losing her. Not just as a professional partner, but as someone who had become essential to his life and the company's pulse. Clara collected her things with deliberate calm, each movement measured and dignified. She avoided the anxious glances of colleagues, the subtle smirks or thinly veiled envy. Her focus remained on herself, on maintaining integrity and self-respect even in the face of pressure. Vincent, meanwhile, felt a growing panic, the rare acknowledgement that his own carefully constructed world depended more than he had realized on Clara's presence. He rose slowly, the leather of his chair creaking under the shift of weight. He wanted to speak, to explain, to plead, but his usual control faltered. He realized that no words could undo the impression he had allowed others to form, the doubts he had not countered sooner. Clara's decision had illuminated a truth he had been avoiding. He needed her, not only for her skill and acumen, but for her presence, her insight, her humanity. As Clara walked toward the door, her heels clicking softly against the polished floor, she allowed herself a quiet acknowledgement of her own courage. The office had tested her, and she had responded with poise, intelligence, and dignity. Her resignation was not an act of anger, but a statement of boundaries, a measure of self-worth. Vincent stepped toward her, hesitant yet determined, the gap between them charged with tension. He opened his mouth, words forming and faltering as he realized the depth of what he was feeling: fear, admiration, and something warmer. A fragile, unspoken affection converged in a way that made him acutely aware of Clara's absence as she moved closer to the elevator. The boardroom remained frozen in quiet astonishment. Colleagues exchanged glances, whispers rising again, but tinged now with recognition rather than mere skepticism. Clara's integrity, courage, and competence had shifted the dynamics of the room. Even in her departure, she commanded respect, challenging assumptions and provoking reflection among those who had doubted her. Outside the elevator, Clara took a slow breath, feeling the release of tension alongside the nervous anticipation of the unknown. She had chosen self-respect over convenience, clarity over comfort, and in doing so, demonstrated the very qualities that made her indispensable. Vincent lingered in the doorway, torn between procedural restraint and an emotional imperative to act. He knew that this was a defining moment not just for the company, but for their evolving relationship. The elevator doors closed with a soft hum, separating her from the boardroom, yet leaving the energy charged and unresolved. Vincent stood alone for a moment, absorbing the gravity of what had just occurred. The fear of losing Clara, her insight, her capability, her quiet strength was acute. He realized, with startling clarity, that her presence had become essential to both his life and the vitality of Carter and Sterling Inc. Vincent Sterling's office felt unusually silent that Monday morning. The hum of computers, the ringing phones, the subtle shuffle of papers, it all seemed distant, muted. Clara Reynolds' desk sat empty, impeccably organized as always, yet now devoid of her presence. He stared at it, chest tightening with a weight he hadn't anticipated. For the first time, he felt the void she left not just in the office, but in the rhythm of his own life. He remembered every small action of hers, the way she refilled his tea without asking, the careful way she arranged contracts, her quick, perceptive corrections of mistakes no one else noticed. She had been more than a secretary, more than an assistant. She had been the pulse of the office, the quiet force holding everything together. And now, she was gone. Vincent's hands shook slightly as he grabbed his coat. He knew where to find her. A tip from one of her colleagues led him to Paws and Heart's Animal Rescue in Brooklyn, a modest, sunlit facility filled with the sounds of barking puppies and chirping birds. Clara had been volunteering there since childhood, and he remembered her mentioning how animal care grounded her, gave her perspective when life felt overwhelming. As he navigated the narrow streets of Brooklyn, Vincent's mind raced. He rehearsed his words again and again, yet none seemed sufficient. How could he express the magnitude of his dependence on her, the realization that she had made his life not only efficient but rich in warmth, laughter, and humanity? He had let the board's whispers, the office politics, and his own pride blind him to what was truly invaluable. Finally, he arrived. The rescue was lively, chaotic, yet Clara moved through it with calm purpose. A little pink piglet named Oliver nuzzled her feet as she knelt to comfort a frightened puppy, adjusting its blanket and speaking in soft tones. Her jeans were mud-streaked, her boots scuffed, and her t-shirt bore faint stains from caring for the animals. Yet she radiated a quiet strength, focused and gentle, commanding attention without demanding it. Vincent's breath caught. He had never seen her like this, not dressed for the office, not managing contracts or clients, but simply being herself. And in that moment, he understood fully Clara had not only saved the company's contracts and reputation, she had shown him a way to live with more empathy, patience, and human connection. He swallowed hard, feeling a pang of guilt that cut deep. Stepping forward, he called her name softly. Clara. The voice startled her, and she turned, eyes narrowing with a mixture of surprise and caution. Her posture stiffened, the piglet wiggling slightly against her lap. Clara's gaze locked onto him, assessing, wary. "Vincent," she said, her tone measured. "I didn't expect you here. He paused, swallowing the words. The perfect lines, the rehearsed explanations, seemed insufficient. He took a careful step closer, then another, the uneven ground making him conscious of every move. I had to see you," he said, voice low, carrying the weight of his remorse. Clara's lips pressed into a thin line. Why? Her eyes searched his, demanding honesty without preamble. Vincent's chest tightened further. He realized honesty was the only path now. "Because I made a mistake," he admitted, "a terrible mistake. I let you walk away without recognizing how essential you are, not just to the company, but to me, to my life." The piglet, sensing the tension, scrambled from her lap and squealed as Vincent's foot landed in a small puddle of mud. He slipped, arms flailing, and fell backward into the straw-covered ground near the pens. Oliver charged forward, nudging him further as Vincent struggled to regain balance, his suit becoming streaked with mud and hay. Clara's lips twitched, a hint of a smile against her will. "You've really gone and made a mess of yourself," she said, voice amused but firm. Vincent groaned, wiping hay from his hair, the embarrassment stinging. Yet he couldn't retreat. Not now, not when the stakes were this high. "I know I've been wrong," he said, struggling upright, mud smearing across his polished shoes. "I should have defended you in the boardroom. I should have recognized your contributions, your value, your worth." He took a careful step closer, hands trembling with urgency. And I can't do this without you. I don't want to. Please, Clara, I need you back. In the office, in my life, everything. Clara's expression hardened, and she shifted Oliver onto her lap again, keeping a protective barrier between them. Vincent, she said slowly, measured, you humiliated me. You let others question my competence, and now you expect me to just forgive and return. Her eyes held a mix of hurt, pride, and quiet strength that struck him deeper than any reprimand could. I don't expect anything, he said, voice breaking slightly. I only hope you'll consider that. What we have, what you've brought to this place, to me is worth more than any pride, any insult, any office politics. You've transformed everything, Clara, and I can't imagine continuing without you. Clara looked down at Oliver, stroking the piglet's soft pink ears, her mind racing. She remembered the long hours, the weight of responsibility, the subtle but constant undercurrent of office scrutiny. Yet she also remembered the moments of genuine connection, Vincent's occasional warmth, the way he had noticed her ideas, her insight, the rare moments he had allowed himself to be vulnerable. A sigh escaped her lips. You realize this is more than just work, right? She asked, not unkindly. It's about respect, trust, everything you've taken for granted. I do, he whispered, and I promise I'll never take it for granted again. I'll fight for you, for us, for what we've built together. She studied him for a long moment, noting the sincerity in his posture, the vulnerability in his eyes, the genuine remorse that colored every word. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, she allowed herself to hope. Vincent stepped forward, mud and hay aside, hands open but tentative, as if offering not just reconciliation, but a pledge. Clara's gaze met his, a silent negotiation of trust and willingness. The morning sunlight spilled into the Boston office, painting warm streaks across the polished floors. Clara Reynolds stepped through the revolving doors with a calm determination, her heels clicking softly against the tile. Today marked her return, and this time she carried not just a bag of essentials, but the quiet confidence of someone who had found her footing and her worth. She paused briefly, inhaling the familiar scent of coffee, polished wood, and office paper, a scent that once felt intimidating, now welcomed her like a faintly familiar embrace. Colleagues glanced up from their desks, some offering warm smiles, others arched brows heavy with curiosity. Whispers floated across the room like a gentle breeze. She's back. As what? Exactly one voice murmured. Director of Creative Strategy. Another answered softly, tinged with awe and perhaps a hint of disbelief. Clara's lips curved into a slight smile. She acknowledged the attention without breaking her stride, her shoulders squared, carrying the subtle air of authority her new position demanded. Vincent Sterling, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit that mirrored his composed authority, appeared beside her. His presence was reassuring, a silent support that grounded her as she stepped toward her desk. Welcome back, Clara, he said, voice calm yet infused with genuine warmth. We're ready for your leadership. His words carried weight, signaling not just a professional endorsement, but personal trust. Clara felt a flicker of reassurance. Here, at last, she was not merely tolerated, she was wanted, respected, and anticipated. Settling into her new workspace, Clara took a moment to absorb the room. Her desk, now positioned at the heart of the operations, overlooked the bustling office, a vantage point that symbolized both responsibility and opportunity. She began organizing her supplies, aligning folders, pens, and notes with meticulous care. Each item placed with intention, reflecting the harmony she aimed to instill in her team. Small details, the angle of a pen holder, the alignment of documents felt significant. This was more than aesthetics. It was a visual representation of her approach to challenges, deliberate, thoughtful, and structured yet adaptable. As the morning unfolded, Clara dove into the tasks that awaited her. Vincent introduced her to ongoing campaigns, upcoming deadlines, and key clients. Their collaboration felt effortless, almost instinctual. She observed him closely, noting subtle cues in his gestures, expressions, and tones. Together, they streamlined workflows, combined creative insights, and refined strategies. Clara marveled at how their skills complemented one another. Her intuitive problem-solving balanced his structured precision. Her creativity sparked fresh ideas that he shaped into actionable plans. The team gradually adjusted to her presence. Some employees, initially skeptical, now regarded her with cautious respect. She made deliberate efforts to engage them, asking for input, acknowledging suggestions, and offering constructive feedback. Her approach encouraged participation, subtly transforming the office dynamic. Employees who had once doubted her capabilities began to see her as a competent and fair leader, someone who valued both innovation and collaboration. Midday brought the first test of her leadership, an important client campaign with high stakes. Clara led the brainstorming session, guiding the team through complex ideas and innovative concepts. She encouraged bold thinking while maintaining clear objectives, fostering an environment where creativity thrived without sacrificing precision. Vincent observed, subtly supporting her direction while allowing her autonomy, a delicate balance that reinforced mutual trust and professional respect. As the team worked, Clara felt the familiar pulse of excitement and responsibility. Each suggestion she made, each adjustment she proposed, was met with immediate implementation and careful evaluation. She navigated the intricate dynamics with patience, attention to detail, and a growing confidence in her vision. Vincent occasionally interjected, offering perspective without overshadowing her authority. Their synergy became apparent to everyone in the room, an unspoken acknowledgement that the collaboration between them was both effective and inspiring. The project advanced smoothly, yet Clara remained vigilant for potential challenges. She noticed subtle inconsistencies in budget allocations and identified areas where messaging could be more compelling. Her observations were precise, supported by evidence and insight, demonstrating an acute awareness of both the creative and operational facets of the campaign. Vincent's eyes followed her every move, a mixture of admiration and quiet pride reflected in his expression. As afternoon light filtered through the blinds, the campaign began to take shape. Clara's guidance transformed initial rough concepts into a polished presentation. Vibrant with clarity and innovation, her team responded to her energy, feeding off her determination and meticulous approach. Each component of the project aligned seamlessly, reflecting both strategic foresight and creative ingenuity. Vincent, standing nearby, allowed himself a small, approving smile, recognizing that Clara's influence elevated the work beyond what he could have anticipated alone. The climax of the day arrived when Clara presented the near-final campaign draft to the office. Every element from visuals to messaging demonstrated her leadership, insight, and creative acumen. Colleagues leaned in, exchanging glances of surprise and appreciation. The quiet buzz of admiration was palpable. Vincent, standing at the back, felt a swell of pride, not only for the campaign's quality, but for Clara's growth, her ability to inspire and lead with intelligence and empathy. Despite the success, Clara remained grounded, attentive to both her team and the subtle dynamics of the office. She encouraged questions, addressed concerns, and made space for dialogue. Her leadership style blended authority with approachability, innovation with structure, and confidence with humility. The office responded, energized by her presence and motivated by the clarity of her vision. As the day drew to a close, Clara and Vincent shared a brief moment of quiet acknowledgement. No words were necessary. The connection between them, professional, personal, and evolving, was evident. The campaign's success promised recognition from major clients and positioned the company for unprecedented opportunities. Yet, Clara knew that this was only the beginning. Her return was more than a personal triumph. It signified a shift in culture, collaboration, and the trajectory of the organization. Clara Reynolds adjusted her blazer nervously as she stepped into the glass-walled conference room at Carter & Stone International. The sunlight reflected off the sleek table and polished floor, illuminating the serious faces of the Pierce Capital executives seated before her. She had anticipated this day, yet the absence of Vincent Sterling beside her amplified the weight of responsibility. Her pulse quickened, and she drew a deep breath, steadying herself. Her hands rested lightly on the table, fingertips brushing the edge of her neatly arranged notes. Every page had been meticulously prepared, every figure double-checked, every visual aid rehearsed repeatedly. Yet, as she looked around the room at the expectant faces, the hum of air conditioning, and the faint scent of coffee, she felt the familiar flutter of nervous anticipation. She reminded herself she was capable. She had prepared for this, and she would not let the absence of Vincent shake her. Clara began by greeting the clients warmly, acknowledging their time and attention. Her voice was calm, but carried a subtle confidence honed over weeks of leading small initiatives, analyzing contracts, and observing Vincent's methodical approach to business. She introduced the Pierce campaign, outlining the objectives, the creative vision, and the tangible strategies designed to engage their target audience. Her words were deliberate, each sentence crafted to convey both clarity and inspiration. From her vantage point at the head of the table, Clara watched as the executives exchanged glances, some nodding subtly, others scribbling notes. She observed reactions carefully, adjusting her tone and emphasis to respond to their unspoken questions. When a client raised a concern about demographic engagement, she smoothly presented data-driven insights, citing research and recent trends she had studied late at night. Her ability to merge creativity with practical analysis impressed even herself. Meanwhile, Vincent lingered just outside the conference room, a few steps away in the hall. He observed discreetly, leaning against the wall, arms crossed, his normally composed face softened by a mixture of pride and anxiety. Each point Clara made, each confident gesture, struck him with renewed admiration. Yet, beneath the pride was a flicker of unease. What if she faltered without him? What if the clients found a flaw he hadn't anticipated? He reminded himself to trust her. After all, she had already proven her insight and resourcefulness repeatedly. Back in the room, Clara guided the discussion with tact, inviting questions and fostering dialogue. She used visual aids to illustrate the narrative arc of the campaign, blending bold graphics with concise explanations. Her explanations were clear, yet infused with warmth, demonstrating both expertise and an approachable leadership style. She noticed subtle cues, a raised eyebrow, a slight nod, and adjusted her delivery accordingly. A particular point of interest came when she introduced an unexpected element in the campaign, a social media component using authentic user-generated content rather than staged advertisements. Clara highlighted how this approach would resonate with the younger audiences, creating engagement and loyalty. The clients leaned forward, visibly intrigued, asking detailed questions about implementation and potential reach. At that moment, Clara felt a surge of exhilaration. Her meticulous preparation, combined with her intuitive understanding of client needs, was unfolding exactly as she had hoped. She answered questions thoroughly, using examples drawn from her research, past campaigns, and real-world applications. Her voice remained steady, her hands expressive but controlled, her posture confident. The room's energy shifted from cautious interest to genuine engagement. Vincent, watching from the hall, allowed himself a small, private smile. He felt a rush of pride so strong it was almost tangible, tempered by his lingering worry. Each time Clara turned slightly, gestured with a pen, or made eye contact with the clients, he was reminded why she was indispensable not just to him, but to the company as a whole. Yet he restrained himself from entering the room, knowing that her moment of independence was crucial. The discussion continued, with Clara responding thoughtfully to objections and elaborating on innovative ideas. She demonstrated an ability to think on her feet, weaving new information seamlessly into her presentation. Every insight she provided reinforced her credibility, and the client's demeanor shifted from reserved skepticism to enthusiastic approval. By the final minutes, Nods of agreement and subtle smiles signaled that the campaign had captured their interest. The twist came unexpectedly. Clara unveiled a small but striking visual, a short video clip, highlighting the emotional resonance of the campaign, showing ordinary people interacting with the product in genuine, relatable scenarios. The client's eyes widened, and a hush fell over the room. The impact was immediate. One executive leaned forward, speaking rapidly with excitement about the potential reach and influence. Clara had anticipated their reactions, but the magnitude of the positive response exceeded even her expectations. By the end of the presentation, the room was abuzz with energy. The clients congratulated her, shaking hands and expressing confidence in the campaign's direction. They praised her clarity, creativity, and professionalism. The approval felt tangible, a validation of her leadership and her ability to translate vision into actionable strategy. Clara allowed herself a quiet, inward smile, savoring the sense of accomplishment and the affirmation that she could thrive independently. After the clients departed, Clara gathered her materials and stepped out into the hall. Vincent was waiting, his expression a mixture of relief, pride, and lingering worry. He approached her quietly, offering a small nod of acknowledgement. Clara returned it, feeling a shared sense of victory, even without a word exchanged. The success of this first major presentation marked a turning point. Clara had proven her competence, not only to the clients, but to herself and the office. Her collaboration with Vincent, though now more equal and dynamic, had evolved into a partnership based on trust, mutual respect, and complementary strengths. The campaign's approval signaled new opportunities, potential contracts, and recognition within the industry. As they walked back toward the main office together, the connection between them was subtly reinforced. The shared glance, the synchronized steps, the quiet understanding of mutual pride and accomplishment all suggested that their professional partnership was deepening into a cohesive, dependable alliance. Clara felt a renewed sense of purpose, a clear awareness of her own abilities, and an anticipation of what lay ahead. Clara Reynolds sat at her desk, fingers hovering over the keyboard, feeling the familiar hum of the office around her. The sunlight filtered through the blinds, casting thin stripes across her organized papers. Despite the calm appearance, tension had settled like a weight on her shoulders. The success of the Pierce campaign had brought admiration, but also envy and heightened expectations. Every glance from colleagues seemed tinged with judgment or skepticism, and the subtle whispers she overheard made her stomach tighten. Vincent Sterling entered the office quietly, his presence commanding yet understated. He observed Clara for a moment, noting the furrowed brow and the slight tension in her shoulders. He knew she felt the mounting pressure, and though he wanted to shield her from it, his position as CEO demanded a measured composure. He gave her a small nod, a silent encouragement, and returned to his office, leaving her to navigate the growing challenges. Clara's first task of the day was reviewing a new contract from Lawson Capital, a high-profile client considering a multi-million-dollar partnership. She read through the documents meticulously, aware that any misstep could jeopardize not only the campaign, but also her hard-earned credibility. Her heart raced slightly as she flagged several clauses that seemed ambiguous. She made notes, cross-referencing with previous contracts, and considered the potential outcomes of negotiating each term. Meanwhile, the office atmosphere was electric. A few colleagues openly questioned the speed of Clara's rise, casting subtle doubts in meetings and during casual conversations near the coffee machine. Sophie from marketing whispered under her breath, "She's only been here a few months, and now leading major campaigns. Let's see how long that lasts." Clara heard the words despite the casual tone, feeling a mix of irritation and resolve. She reminded herself that her work spoke louder than rumors. Vincent, watching from his office, noticed the tension Clara faced. He clenched his jaw, sensing the thinly veiled attempts to undermine her. But he also understood the importance of letting her navigate these challenges independently. He couldn't interfere too directly without drawing attention to the dynamics. Yet, he wanted her to feel his support. He tapped a pen against his desk, silently strategizing how to balance protection and autonomy. Clara's next challenge came in the form of a last-minute revision request from the client. They wanted adjustments to the proposed media strategy, questioning the allocation of resources and expected ROI. Clara took a deep breath, recalling the notes she had made from client feedback and her own analysis of market trends. She outlined several alternative approaches, each backed with data and reasoning, presenting them clearly in her internal report. Just as she finalized her recommendations, Lucas from legal approached her desk with a smirk. "Are you sure you've accounted for all potential liabilities in these contracts?" "Clara, it would be a shame if something slipped through and caused issues later." Clara felt a flash of irritation but kept her composure. She reviewed the flagged items carefully, double-checked the numbers, and noted how each adjustment aligned with the company's interests. Lucas leaned over, clearly attempting to intimidate, but Clara maintained her steady tone. The high point of tension arrived when the executive team convened for a quick strategy meeting. Clara presented her findings and recommendations, projecting confidence even as her pulse quickened. One of the board members raised a probing question, subtly challenging her assumptions. Clara listened attentively, her mind racing, then responded with clarity and precision, citing past successes and relevant data. Her calm, measured answers diffused the potential conflict, and the board member nodded, impressed despite initial skepticism. Vincent observed quietly, pride mixing with relief. He recognized how Clara's intelligence and composure shone under pressure. Yet he also noticed the invisible strain on her shoulders, the exhaustion, the self-doubt, the determination to prove herself continually. He made a mental note to support her in ways she might not even realize she needed. Later that afternoon, Clara returned to her desk, pausing to glance at the city skyline outside the office windows. The pressure had not lessened, but she felt a subtle shift within herself. Each obstacle, each skeptical glance, each whisper of doubt had become an opportunity to demonstrate resilience and capability. She understood that part of her role now was navigating not only client expectations, but also office politics, and she was prepared to do so with integrity. As the day wore on, a minor twist challenged her again. A colleague inadvertently sent an outdated version of a campaign proposal to a client. Clara caught the error just in time, composing a corrected version and sending a brief, professional note explaining the update. The client responded with appreciation for the prompt correction. This small victory reinforced Clara's confidence, and she allowed herself a brief, quiet smile before returning to the next task. Vincent, noticing her expression, felt a mix of relief and admiration. He knew that Clara's ability to handle such situations gracefully was rare and invaluable, yet he also sensed the undercurrent of stress that came with being constantly tested. He made a mental note to acknowledge her efforts in a way that would encourage rather than overwhelm her. By the late afternoon, the office began to settle, though whispers and cautious glances persisted. Clara took a moment to organize her notes, reviewing the day's achievements and anticipating the next challenges. Despite the pressure, she felt a growing sense of belonging and purpose. She realized that her relationship with Vincent, founded on mutual respect and shared goals, provided a steady anchor amidst the turbulence of the office environment. As the workday ended, Clara gathered her belongings, preparing to leave the office. She paused near the window, looking out at the Boston skyline in the fading light. The city seemed vast, yet she felt a quiet determination. The challenges ahead were significant, but she understood her capacity to rise to them, guided by her own insight and the subtle support of Vincent. Walking out into the evening air, she felt a mixture of relief and anticipation. The day had tested her abilities, challenged her composure, and proven her value. Yet, she knew the real work was just beginning, balancing professional pressures, navigating complex relationships, and continuing to demonstrate the unique skills and judgment that had earned her this position. The early morning sun filtered through the thin slats of the Brooklyn Animal Shelter, casting soft lines across the pens. Clara Reynolds knelt on the straw, gently cradling a small, pink piglet named Oliver, her hands warm and steady despite the chill in the air. She had been volunteering here for a week, seeking comfort and clarity after the tension at the office. The smell of hay and the quiet squeals of animals surrounded her, offering a temporary escape from the whirlwind of corporate politics. Footsteps approached softly on the concrete floor. Clara glanced up, expecting another volunteer, but instead, she saw Vincent Sterling standing at the entrance, a bouquet of pale pink peonies in his hands. His usually impeccable suit was smudged with dirt and straw, and his expression was a mix of anxiety and determination. Clara's heart tightened, a flutter of apprehension and curiosity mingling. Vincent's voice broke the morning calm. "Clara, I made a terrible mistake." His words were earnest, each syllable carrying the weight of regret. Clara remained seated, clutching Oliver, her eyes narrowing slightly as she assessed him. "I know you think I don't deserve your time," he continued, stepping cautiously toward the pens. "But I need you to understand, you're essential, not just to the company, but to me." Clara's fingers tightened around the piglet, her mind racing. She had seen this man command boardrooms, close multi-million-dollar deals, and maintain an unshakable exterior. Yet now, he appeared vulnerable, exposed in a way that made her chest ache with a strange warmth. The contrast between his confident office persona and this softened, almost pleading version of him struck a chord she hadn't anticipated. Vincent inched closer, his gaze locked on hers. "I left you because I was afraid to admit how much I needed you. Afraid that showing weakness would make me less in control. But Clara, life without you is hollow. Every decision feels emptier. Every success feels incomplete." His words tumbled out, raw and unpolished, yet laden with sincerity. Clara remained quiet, processing the torrent of emotion. She felt a mixture of empathy, lingering frustration, and a profound recognition of the man behind the polished facade. Her mind wandered back to the countless hours she had watched him work tirelessly, to the subtle moments when he had let down his guard, and now, seeing him here messy, vulnerable, undeniably human, she felt a shift in the delicate balance between them. As Vincent stepped onto a patch of straw, his foot slipped in the mud near the edge of a pen. He lost balance, arms flailing slightly, and fell with an awkward thud. The bouquet flew into the air, petals scattering like confetti across the hay. Clara gasped, instinctively placing Oliver safely to the side before rushing toward him. Vincent looked up from the straw, a sheepish grin breaking through the tension. "Well, this wasn't exactly the entrance I had planned." Clara couldn't help but laugh softly. Despite the lingering intensity of the moment, her laughter was a gentle bridge between caution and connection, a quiet acknowledgement that human vulnerability could be both messy and endearing. Clara helped Vincent to his feet, brushing straw from his shoulders and smoothing the damp fabric of his suit. She looked into his eyes, searching for the truth behind his words. "Vincent, why here? Why now?" Her voice was steady, but curiosity and emotion threaded through it. Vincent took a deep breath, steadying himself. "Because this is where I realize just how much you bring to my life. You're not just capable, you're irreplaceable. You make me want to be better, to care beyond efficiency and profit, and I won't let you go again." He paused, the words heavy, each one deliberate. "Please, come back, to the company, to me. I need you, Clara, more than I ever admitted before." Clara's heart thudded as she absorbed his confession. She felt the weight of sincerity, the unguarded vulnerability that he rarely, if ever, revealed. Her mind flickered between caution and trust, professional boundaries and personal connection. Slowly, she realized that his plea was not just about career concerns or ego. It was about genuine reliance, a need that mirrored her own unspoken attachments. Vincent, sensing hesitation, knelt in the straw before her, his hands extending toward hers. The act was both absurd and profound, humor and emotion entwined in a single gesture. Clara blinked, the surreal image striking her with its intensity. He was exposing himself completely, surrendering pride and control, a powerful mix of humility and courage. "Clara," he said softly, almost reverently, I don't have the right to ask this, but will you come back? Will you let me support you, protect you from the pressures, and let us work together, not just professionally, but in life? His gaze searched hers for understanding, patience, and hope. Clara looked down at the scattered petals, then back at Vincent. She saw the earnestness in his eyes, the subtle tremor in his hands, and the vulnerability he had rarely shown. She recognized that this was not a performance, not a calculated move. This was the essence of him, revealed fully and trustingly. A soft smile tugged at the corners of her lips. "I will," she whispered, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "On one condition, you protect me from everything. And I mean everything that threatens to diminish what we've built professionally or personally." Vincent's eyes lit with relief and gratitude. He extended a hand, not just to shake hers, but to affirm a promise, a pact of mutual respect, trust, and partnership. Clara took it, their fingers entwining naturally. The tension that had lingered for weeks dissipated, replaced by the warmth of understanding and shared resolve. As they stood together in the hay, the morning sun fully illuminating the scene, Clara allowed herself a quiet laugh. The absurdity of the pig nudging Vincent's tie, bringing a lightness to the moment. Vincent chuckled too, brushing off straw, his heart finally unburdened. They had navigated fear, vulnerability, and pride to arrive at this delicate balance, mutual acknowledgement of need, trust, and connection. The path back to the office was set, but more importantly, the bridge between hearts had been rebuilt. Clara felt the weight of her responsibilities, but alongside it, a deep assurance that she and Vincent could face challenges together, both in business and in life. The scattered petals and the small, stubborn pig had become symbols of imperfection and humanity, and the beauty of embracing both. The city skyline glimmered through the large windows of the Sterling and Reynolds office, the late afternoon sun spilling across polished desks and neatly stacked reports. Clara Reynolds walked in with a calm, measured confidence, her shoes clicking softly against the marble floor. The familiar scent of coffee mingled with the faint aroma of office polish. Comforting in its routine, today marked the official start of her role as Director of Creative Strategy, a position earned through months of dedication, intelligence, and resilience. Vincent Sterling was already at his desk, reviewing the final slides for the Pierce campaign. His posture was less rigid than usual, but his eyes remained sharp, scanning every detail with unwavering attention. When he noticed Clara enter, a subtle warmth flickered across his expression. This was no longer just an assistant returning to her desk. This was a partner, someone whose insight and initiative had become indispensable. Clara set her bag down carefully and pulled up a chair beside him. She glanced at the campaign documents spread across the table, noting the slight discrepancies in projected timelines and budget allocations. Her mind automatically began recalculating figures, considering alternative approaches, and visualizing strategies that could appeal more directly to the client's goals. Vincent watched her, impressed by the familiar focus, but also aware of the gentle confidence she carried, the kind that invited collaboration rather than command. "Everything looks solid," Clara said softly, leaning over a series of charts. "But if we adjust the pacing for the rollout, we could increase engagement by nearly 20% without additional costs." Her voice was calm but deliberate, each word weighted with careful thought. Vincent nodded slowly, absorbing her suggestion. He knew from experience that her ideas were rarely theoretical. They were grounded in keen observation, creative thinking, and a natural understanding of people. As they worked side by side, coordinating team members and delegating tasks, the office seemed to hum with renewed energy. Clara's attention to detail complemented Vincent's strategic oversight. She reminded a junior designer to adjust the color palette for a more cohesive presentation, gently corrected the copywriter on a phrasing that might confuse the target audience, and suggested a visual metaphor that made the campaign's message more compelling. Vincent silently admired how effortlessly she guided the team, her leadership quiet but authoritative. Midway through the afternoon, an unexpected challenge arose. A key client requested a last-minute adjustment, threatening to delay the campaign launch. Clara paused for a moment, considering the implications. Then, with precise reasoning and a clear plan, she instructed the team on how to implement the changes without compromising the overall vision. Vincent observed, partly relieved, partly awed. Her decision not only resolved the issue, but also enhanced the campaign's impact, turning potential disruption into a strategic advantage. The office phones rang intermittently, emails poured in, and team members consulted with Clara and Vincent at every turn. Through it all, Clara maintained an even demeanor, occasionally offering a reassuring word or a supportive glance to a flustered colleague. Vincent provided guidance and affirmation, ensuring that her leadership was visible and respected. The synergy between them became palpable. They operated as a single unit, seamlessly blending strategic foresight with creative execution. A turning point arrived when a crucial decision had to be made regarding a high-profile client presentation. Clara suggested an innovative approach, integrating authentic customer stories with compelling visual data to create a narrative that was both persuasive and relatable. Vincent hesitated initially, weighing the risk against the potential reward. Then he looked at Clara, noting the confidence in her eyes and the careful consideration behind every recommendation. He smiled slightly and nodded, "Let's do it your way." The result was immediate and powerful. The client responded with enthusiasm, impressed not only by the clarity and creativity of the presentation, but also by the thoughtfulness and authenticity embedded in the strategy. Vincent leaned back in his chair, letting out a quiet breath of relief and admiration. Clara had not only met expectations, she had surpassed them, turning a standard campaign into a memorable, impactful experience. As the day drew to a close, Vincent and Clara reviewed the final reports together. There was a shared sense of accomplishment in the air, a quiet satisfaction that only comes from navigating challenges successfully while maintaining integrity and creativity. Clara smiled at Vincent, a subtle acknowledgement of the partnership they had built, a connection that went beyond titles or office hierarchies. "Today was impressive," Vincent said, his voice warm yet measured. "You handled everything flawlessly. I couldn't have asked for a better collaborator." His words carried more than professional approval. They reflected genuine respect and personal admiration. Clara felt a soft warmth spread through her chest, recognizing the mutual trust and understanding that had grown between them. As they packed up for the evening, Clara paused by the window, watching the city lights begin to flicker on. Vincent stood beside her, silent, yet present in a way that conveyed both support and quiet pride. The challenges of the office would continue, and pressures would inevitably rise. But, for now, there was a shared calm, a sense of alignment in purpose, strategy, and values. Vincent extended his hand toward Clara, a gesture that transcended mere office formality. She took it, their grip firm yet familiar, a silent promise of partnership, trust, and shared ambition. In that moment, the professional and the personal intertwined seamlessly, a reminder that collaboration was most powerful when grounded in respect, empathy, and mutual understanding. Clara left the office that evening with a sense of fulfillment, knowing that her efforts had made a tangible difference. Vincent watched her go, feeling a rare stillness in his chest, a mixture of pride, affection, and relief. They were no longer CEO and secretary, no longer leader and assistant. They were partners, fully present, fully engaged, and fully committed to navigating both the challenges of the business and the nuances of their growing connection. The morning sun filtered gently through the trees of Central Park, casting a warm golden glow across the small clearing where Clara Reynolds and Vincent Sterling were about to exchange vows. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of blooming flowers and freshly cut grass. A handful of close friends, family, and colleagues gathered quietly, their eyes bright with anticipation, yet the atmosphere remained intimate and comforting. Clara adjusted the delicate lace of her dress, the fabric brushing softly against her skin, and took a slow, steadying breath. Vincent stood nearby, his tailored suit impeccably neat, yet there was an unusual softness in his posture. His hands were slightly tense as he straightened his tie for the third time, a nervous habit he rarely displayed at the office. Clara noticed it and allowed herself a small, understanding smile. She remembered the first days in the office, the chaos of files, phones, and contracts, and the way Vincent's intense gaze had first unsettled her. Now, the tension had been replaced by trust, partnership, and a deep, unspoken affection. The officiant cleared his throat softly, and the ceremony began. Clara's fingers clutched the small bouquet of wildflowers she had chosen, the colors vivid and natural. Each petal seemed to reflect her journey, the messy starts, the early victories, the moments of doubt, and the quiet resilience that had brought her here. She glanced at Vincent, who met her eyes steadily, conveying without words the years of shared experience, mutual respect, and growing love. As Vincent took Clara's hands in his, there was a brief, joyful pause when Oliver, the rescued pig who had become an office mascot and beloved companion, trotted across the clearing. His little hooves kicked up leaves, and he sniffed at the edges of the bride's dress. Guests chuckled softly, and Clara couldn't help but laugh, the sound light and genuine, carrying a sense of warmth and relief. Vincent's lips twitched into a small, amused smile. Even in a perfect, planned moment, life had a way of reminding them both of its unpredictability. The officiant's words were steady and warm, guiding them through the simple yet meaningful promises. Clara's eyes welled slightly as she repeated the vows, thinking of the obstacles she had faced, the skepticism of colleagues, the pressure of high-stakes campaigns, and the moments when she had doubted her own abilities. Each challenge now seemed like a stepping stone, leading to this moment of recognition and fulfillment, both professionally and personally. Vincent's voice was calm yet resonant, carrying the weight of someone who had learned to see beyond rigid routines and business walls to the human heart behind the work. When it came time for the rings, Vincent's hands shook subtly as he removed the elegant solitaire from its box. He paused, taking a deep breath, looking directly at Clara. She could see the mixture of nervousness and certainty, of respect and love, in his gaze. As he slid the ring onto her finger, Clara felt a wave of emotion, a profound acknowledgement of their journey together, the sleepless nights of planning campaigns, the shared moments of quiet understanding, the laughter, and even the mishaps that had bonded them more closely than words ever could. Oliver, seemingly sensing the emotional gravity of the moment, ambled forward and nudged Vincent's leg, causing him to stumble slightly. The guests erupted in gentle laughter, and Clara chuckled, shaking her head in affectionate disbelief. Even the smallest, most unpredictable details had a place in their story. Vincent laughed, a genuine, unguarded sound that mingled with Clara's, solidifying the joy of the day. It was messy, human, and perfect. As the ceremony concluded, they exchanged a soft, lingering kiss. The applause of their closest friends and family was heartfelt, echoing not just the celebration of a union, but the recognition of courage, perseverance, and authenticity. Clara felt a quiet pride not in herself alone, but in the partnership she and Vincent had cultivated. Together, they had navigated challenges, embraced opportunities, and discovered a love rooted in honesty, respect, and shared growth. The reception, modest yet elegant, allowed for both laughter and reflection. Guests enjoyed light music, fresh flowers, and an abundance of smiles. Clara moved through the space, greeting colleagues who had once doubted her, now offering congratulations and admiration. Vincent stayed close, whispering notes of affection and shared jokes, reinforcing the sense of intimacy even amidst the celebration. Each small gesture, the clinking of glasses, the careful arrangement of napkins, the subtle attentiveness to guests' comfort, mirrored the attention to detail and care they had cultivated in their professional partnership. As evening fell, Clara and Vincent stepped onto a small balcony, the skyline of New York glowing softly against the night sky. The city had always been a backdrop to their story, its busy streets, corporate towers, and endless possibilities a metaphor for the chaos and opportunities they had faced together. Now, in this quiet, suspended moment, they could simply breathe and appreciate what they had built: trust, respect, love, and shared purpose. Vincent gently took Clara's hand, the warmth of his palm grounding her amidst the excitement of the day. "We did it," he said quietly, voice tinged with awe and contentment. Clara nodded, squeezing his hand in return. "We did. Together." It was more than a statement of success. It was a recognition that their combined strengths, her creativity, his strategy, their mutual understanding had carried them through challenges and triumphs alike. As the night drew on, Oliver once again wandered near, playfully nudging a table or sniffing a guest's shoe, eliciting smiles and laughter. Clara glanced at him, thinking how even small acts of unpredictability and whimsy could bring joy and perspective. Life was not about perfection. It was about courage, integrity, connection, and the willingness to embrace moments of both humor and significance. When the final toast was made, Clara and Vincent stood together, their hands entwined, hearts full. The crowd cheered, and in that moment, it felt as though every obstacle, every decision, and every vulnerable moment had been acknowledged and celebrated. The message was clear: love, honesty, courage, and the acknowledgement of true value, both personal and professional, always find their way to triumph. As they walked hand in hand through the garden, rose petals gently falling around them, Clara felt the culmination of the journey from a nervous secretary to a confident, respected leader, and from two colleagues navigating a complicated workplace to a couple united in life and purpose. Vincent whispered, "Ready for a lifetime of organized chaos." Clara laughed, leaning closer. "With you, I wouldn't have it any other way." And as they stepped into the awaiting car, Oliver trotting beside them, the city lights of New York shimmering behind, the story concluded not with perfection, but with harmony, joy, and the promise of a shared future rich with challenges, laughter, growth, and love. Life often reminds us that true value is not always recognized at first glance. Clara's journey shows us that perseverance, honesty, and a willingness to embrace challenges can transform not only our careers, but also the lives of those around us. It is a lesson in courage, the courage to speak up, to act decisively, and to trust one's instincts even when others doubt us. At the same time, Vincent's story teaches the importance of vulnerability. No amount of success or power can replace the human need for connection, empathy, and trust. By allowing himself to show weakness and rely on someone who brings warmth and perspective, he discovers that strength and leadership are enhanced, not diminished, by compassion. Together, their journey illustrates that meaningful relationships, whether professional or personal, are built on respect, honesty, and mutual support. Life rewards those who are patient, attentive, and courageous enough to step beyond routine and embrace the unexpected. The lesson is clear: stay authentic, nurture your abilities, and value the people who see your potential. Success is not only about achievements, but also about the hearts we touch and the courage we display along the way. Thank you so much for joining us on Clara and Vincent's journey. If their story inspired you or touched your heart, please give this video a like, share it with friends who would enjoy it, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more heartfelt stories. Your support means the world and helps us continue bringing these moments to life.